Thank you. Always saving my life. Okay. So Jeannie, I think those are my comments and I don't know if the subcommittee wanted anything to say or if you want to wait till after the probably makes sense after the presentation for the subcommittee to speak on their
Okay.
comments. So I
Okay,
will
so
stop
Mimi, do you want
sharing
to
and
present then?
I will. I want to make sure Alexander Porter is with us. If not, I can present my screen. Do you need to be elevated, Alexander? Is that what,
yeah, let me
has he
find
been elevated?
He's on mute.
He is there. He put up the heart emoji so he can hear us.
find as soon as I find him,
Um,
I'll make him a
he
co-host.
raised his hand.
Ah, there he is. Okay, that helps. Thank you. There you go, Alexander. You're a co-host now.
Hey, I've been freed.
All right. I'll still share my screen, Alexander, and we'll go from here.
Sounds
But
good.
thank you, commissioners, for being here this evening. We're especially grateful for Lisa for coming. There was probably a lot of heartache amongst our team, but as I mentioned, I'm joined here with Alexander Porter. We're the design team, as well as Justin Hodge, the head of school, and Garrett Hatton, who is leading our effort and sits on the board. Joe Cornish went through all of the schedule, but as you know, we saw the full commission in January. We formed a subcommittee and we got very good feedback on where we should go. And we heard very loud and clear that an exterior stair would not be acceptable and that we really had to figure out how to get two stairs to work within the building, which presents its challenges due to the dimensions of the building. But to cut to the chase, I think this group of commissioners that's with us tonight is very familiar with this proposal, but I will summarize and I'm going to hand it off to Alexander. In January, we came to you with a proposal that added a second means of egress. We are changing this building to an educational use, which requires this. And we proposed an exterior stair that required a lot of interventions, from a new opening for window, doors, etc. So there was a long laundry list of items that we were asking. We have since pivoted with your great feedback to a current proposal that accommodates a second stair within the building. We'll show you exactly how that happens. And the bonus for this design is that we're able to remove some additions that were added that are in the 20s that really we feel are not in keeping with the building. And so we'll walk you through that. So the request is to add a little extension to be able to accommodate the stair. And then we're able to even reduce some of the fire balconies. You'll see that on future slides, which I think also improves the exterior design. So here's where I'm going to hand it off to Alexander, if you could walk us through the slides.
Mimi. Yeah, so we showed a number of different attempts to fit these two means of egress, that meet dimensional standards for commercial buildings in this small building. The subcommittee helped us to understand what would and wouldn't be acceptable, and ultimately we're able to make this proposal work, where we've taken from the street, which you have on the left. Clarendon Street is on the left of the page. For both these buildings, you have the existing building, which has a recessed stoop. So you actually enter up a couple of stairs, and then on the rear of the parlor level, there's an existing oriel that extends about 29 inches past the plane of the building. We kind of got out our tape measures and really tried to figure out how we could pace out all the stairs that we needed in order to provide two stairs within this bay, uh, and the accessible entry that's required. So by pushing that stoop back and providing that accessible entry, we kind of have a short flight of stairs that takes you to the parlor. And then we really studied these two switchback stairs to have the kind of minimum number of treads that we would need on this parlor level, which is the highest floor to floor at 14 feet 6 inches. And the result of all that work was that we are able to accommodate both of the stairs in this configuration with only a kind of modest extension from what is there. We're proposing a 59-inch extension to replace the existing 29-inch extension. And so here you see in the section why this has been so challenging and why we think this is a really good solution for the school and for the city. The two stairs have to jog between one another to kind of make up the irregular floor-to-floor height. And the last level, where we have only 12 feet floor to floor, we're able to accomplish without a mid landing because it's below the code threshold requiring a mid landing. So those two stairs step within the building entirely and crisscross one another. So that extension, is replacing this existing rear profile you see in blue with the profile in red. And kind of only extending past the existing fire balconies by 23 inches. We did an area analysis also I didn't mention, and this extension is actually going to be a little bit smaller than the current building. So this is a picture of the back of the building as it currently is today with that oriel that was added, and there's also an addition on the lowest level. We found with the assistance of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay that these were additions in 1921 by the owner. And the next slide shows the plan so that you can see those two additions that more or less are intact today, the projection to enlarge the kitchen on the parlor, and then a kind of storage room on the lower level. So these are not original to the building, and today when you look at the additions, they're a bit of an eyesore. They have, a number of undesirable conditions that we want to rectify, including an exposed kitchen exhaust fan, exposed condenser units that are highly visible for the neighbors and from the alleyway. A lot of exterior trim that's in disrepair, exposed conduit feeding both the electrical fixtures and exposed line sets feeding those pieces of equipment. So we think that this proposal is also a way that we can eliminate all these conditions and provide something that's much more trim and keeping with the residential character of the alleys. So here again is that comparison we discussed with the subcommittee that we believe that this does enhance the residential character of the alley, which the guidelines kind of request for the rear yards. And then you also see that the fire balconies that currently extend past the bow of the building, we're going to be able to cut back so that they can provide, that fire assistance and entry into our second stair in the event of an emergency. Without encroaching on the bow of the building. This is a view showing the same addition from Marlborough Street. It's not visible, from this vantage. And then another view from the alley that's, showing the existing condition on the left and the proposed condition on the right, kind of showing that it is keeping in rhythm with the bow, the two oriels of the neighbors, and then an existing step of the building on Marlborough Street. So we were asked to study the HVAC equipment, like Joe mentioned. We have produced a mock-up at location A, which is the highest part of the building in the center, which is kind of what the guidelines request. But we also study the location B towards the back of the building and the location C in the rear yard. We have to provide, some air source refrigeration equipment to heat and cool the building using electricity. This will be an all-electric school. It will not use fossil fuels to condition or provide any energy for the building's domestic hot water. So these units come in the form of a 14-ton VRF condenser and two 1-ton VRF condensers. Those ones are more residential size. The 14-ton is a bit larger. These have to sit on some stands to avoid snow accumulation. So we studied 10 locations and took photos and kind of mathematically calculated which locations were visible and from where. The magenta location in the center, it was visible from 5 locations. as Joe mentioned, both in public alley 423 and 424, as well as some locations in the park. I'll show you enlargements in a moment. The location B was not visible from the front, but much more visible from the back. So that was a kind of a consideration there. And location C is not visible from any location in the public way. So the next couple slides just walk through these views in large. This is right in front of the building. This is moving back down the alley. You see in magenta the location of that equipment. As we move further down alley 424, and here in the
Sorry.
park, no worries, not visible from Clarendon Street or from that location, but if you do back up to the next location, you are able to see it, albeit through the branches of the trees. And then moving down public alley 423, neither location is visible from here, but as we back up, they become more visible. This location, you start to see the units in location B, and moving back, they both become more visible as you move further away. So then the next slide is kind of our other solution for location C, which puts the units in the rear yard. We discussed this, with NABB in their meeting last week, and would be open to considering some screening additionally if this is the preferred location by BBAC. These units, even on their stands, will not extend past the fence because this is a recessed, a sunken, lower level, and that fence will extend over them by at least a foot or two. Then just to show you the other, roof penetrations, these are all pretty ancillary, but there'll be a couple of air intakes added to this roof. They'll be quite low, 15 inches or so, not visible from any location. We are removing 4 rooftop condensing units, regardless of the location that is selected for our new condensing units that you see right there.
And you, I believe, told us before that there will not be any elevator override. Is that correct?
That's correct, Tom, and we have a slide about it, our
Great.
last slide in the deck.
Sorry.
No,
Jumping-
that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep going. We can certainly come back to any of these slides. But I want to get back to the front of the building. We have an existing condition where, as we described in plan, we have steps that get us to that first floor, the piano nobile. You can see the existing condition here. Because we need to create an accessibility entrance, we are proposing to bring that door down to street level. And you can see the reason that solves our problem is that once we get in the building, we can create a lift, a landing for access to actually the elevator in our new proposed scheme, and then stairs that get us back up to that first floor level. We're pushing the stairs back. One thing I just want to highlight is we talked about a couple of examples in the Back Bay area, but 267 is a building 2 doors down where we think leveraging somewhat symmetry, it's not identical, would be a nice solution. That door, it's not quite an ADA condition because it has a 7-inch riser underneath the door. We would have to be flush at grade in order to achieve it. But this is that side by side, that's that 7-inch rise that I was talking about. There is an iron work that we think would be nice to replicate, again, to create that balance and symmetry of that elevation on Clarendon Street. And we're taking some cues from the geometry. We have that lintel here, which really dictates some of the trellis components, the pure geometry of the fan. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we've really worked on the proportion of the door. And we think an 8'6" door really allows the geometry of the ironwork above to work well with the proportion of the door below. The 267 and 263 are more or less aligned, but they're not identical because we're proportionally trying to make sure this door is appropriate for its entrance, which is a bit wider than at 267. We are looking at two solutions, one that has just fixed panels and another option that has side lights for viewing and security visibility in and out of the doors. So this is our proposed solution. We prefer the side lights, but are open to comments. The other thing I just want to highlight is signage is something that we are considering. This is a sign that exists at 107 Marlborough Street that identifies the school. It's a bronze placard. It has concealed fasteners, and it's approximately 10 by 14. And we would like to replicate a sign similar. We haven't really gotten into what the text says, but it will definitely identify the school. We think it would be appropriate here beside the door. And so this is a comparison of the elevation that exists today and what we're hoping to accommodate with that ADA solution. And again, it balances out the elevation that faces Clarendon Street. So some additional items, just so we're aware of all of the scope of the work. We are planning to replace all of the windows. We think this is a benefit because they will be true divided lights. These windows were replaced in its former life. We're going to be able to remove the actual storm windows. We, are looking at Belle Isle windows. They were used at 320 Marlborough Street. Again, they have two true divided lights, and that will be a replacement for all of the windows. The other item that it's really just a maintenance issue, the skylight that exists is in terrible condition, and we want to replace it in kind. The location, the size, the dimensions will replicate what's there. We will have to have an exhaust, but that will be a minimal opening that we will include, but otherwise it will be replaced in kind. And then the fence, currently there is an existing wood fence. It does have a raised door to provide access to the easements along the way. There's some stairs that connect all the rear yards. We're proposing to do a fence that's similar and made out of wood. It's a double-sided fence, so it's going to have a little bit more heft than what you're seeing here. We're not imagining that we would raise the height of a fence to have a door, but just have a fence that maximizes the height of the fence and gate at 6 feet. So because of the slope, we're going to take the low point and set the height and work backwards.
And what color is that going to be?
So we prefer to keep it similar to what it is. Right now, it's really a black that we think that might be a bit too harsh. So we think in the darker tones, it could take on a green tone. We like this black forest green color. Just to give it a little bit of color, but black iron could be another consideration. And then we have minimal lights that just light the pathway. We think, something that could, just be simple and almost not call attention to itself could be a good approach. So we talked about the height of the fence. So this is a construction. We imagine the exterior will be tight joints. It'll have a top cap, but on the interior, we'll change the boards to be horizontal and just to be able to have some gaps within the frame construction just for movement and breathability. And then this is the location of the elevator and its new interior layout. It's generally at this location. We actually we have 16 feet clear to the height of the roof, but we need 13.8 to accommodate the hoist beam and the overrun. So we're well within that. We might have to do some local framing, but it would not change at all the height or the slope of the roof. And that's all we have. I know that's a lot. We're happy to go back to any slide.
Fortunately, you have all of the subcommittee members here.
I know. That's really fortunate. I think, Rob, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Lisa was on the subcommittee.
Yes,
Yeah, all right. Well,
Yes.
the president is the subcommittee.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think the fence is wonderful. The downlights are appropriate for security and visibility for walking. The color, I'm indifferent, black or the other two that you recommended. Those are interesting colors. Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion.
And I agree with Rob. I do think there are some precedential issues if we've talked about, because they aren't precedential, that this is a unique kind of a building. We are making some deviations from the guidelines, both in the front and the back. And if we decide to put the HVAC equipment on the ground level, which I agree with Joe makes the most sense. So I think as we craft the motion, I'd like to suggest some language relating to that, just to make it very clear that this is not, that this is a special case and not a precedent. But I also think that some of the details that we've talked about can be handled if Joe's willing to refer them to staff, location of the signage, color of the fence, and all of the other details. I don't think you're far away from where we would all be, but I would want to have Joe take a look at the final and have the final approval of those.
Okay,
Okay,
Joe,
so-
please, are you ready to move to comments or anybody else has some?
I think so. Rob, was there anything more you wanted to say with your motion?
No, I mean, the sign's appropriate. I assume the sign is going to have a black background and be in brass and be the same size or thereabouts. I can't imagine that they'd want to change the language too much. So I think the sign's fine.
And I
Are
just,
we all okay with having the HVAC equipment on the ground level?
Oh, absolutely. And
Okay.
it's not necessarily a precedent, Tom, because
No, I don't think I think we just have to make it clear that
yeah,
this
yeah.
is an unusual building, both because of the fact that it's been approved as a school and because of the size of the building, which is atypically small, and its location on a corner. It's really quite unusual.
okay. So members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use a platform, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at backbay@boston.gov. I'm sorry, backbayac@boston.gov. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on a project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues related to use, street traffic, and noise are outside the commission's purview. Ms. Hers, you have your hand raised. Are you able to unmute him?
Yes, good evening, commissioners and Joe. Serge Savard, co-chair of the Architecture Committee and chairman of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay. We had a chance to see this project both in the subcommittees as in the audience, and also have some meetings with the applicant about this proposal. We're really in favor of the Neighborhood Association has already been in favor of the school in a zoning application, but we're actually very happy now of the new proposal, especially of the back, where there's a lot of removal of fire balconies. We don't have this massive ironwork in the back. And also the extension of that bay that is done by about 2.5 feet, is done only on 1 floor up and not 2 floor up. So what do you think? It's very good. We also think that, as Commissioner Hai was saying, that it's not a precedent, but I would say, in my view, since the building use is not a portion that the commission should look into, to me, what seems really key here is this was done to meet code requirement, this slight extension in the back, and it's due to the configuration of the existing stairs and entrance in the building that caused to meet this code requirement that needs to be done. So it's really code requirement plus current geometry of the building that is causing this slight bay extension that is done. But I think it's a very elegant solution. On the HV units, we are in favor to put the HV unit in the yard, given the high visibility that it would have in the location of the roof that were mocked up and seen, and because of this building is very visible from many locations due to the playground as well. We're just curious if there was going to be any screening on the HVAC unit, but the fence will be screening the first thing. I think it's more for the users internally that I think screening could be a good idea. On the entranceway, we're really in favor of that design because it's symmetrical to the design of 267. It's going to merge well in the landscape of the street, and we think it's a very appropriate solution. And we're also okay with the plaque size and the plaque location that is proposed for the because it's really a present signage, but at the same time discrete, which seems to be very appropriate. And regarding the back of the fence and all that, we think the color that makes sense to remind this to staff, but probably the interior of this could be probably more lively for the school, but again, that will not be visible from the exterior. So overall, we think that it's a very nice project for the neighborhood. It's an improvement to this building, and we're very happy to see what's been proposed.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with a comment? I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
I did receive some written comment from Margaret and Jim Bell, and I'll just read it. They write, we are writing to you to express concern regarding one aspect of the project at 263 Clarendon Street. We are neighbors who reside at 65 Commonwealth Avenue and are therefore adjacent to the project. Units on the 7th and 8th floors of 65 Commonwealth Avenue are above the roof line of 263 Clarendon Street. We have reviewed the plans posted on the city website and are quite concerned with the proposed large AC units being placed on the roof. Our primary concern with the roof placement of the HVAC system is noise pollution. If the HVAC system is placed according to the A or B configuration. Additionally, we share the broader Back Bay community concerns that roof placement of the HVAC systems are visible from the various street locations, and this will set a bad precedent for any future developments in the Back Bay. While slide 16 indicates several street positions from which the proposed roof installation of the HVAC system is visible, we also note that the proposed installation is visible from Marlborough Street. And they had attached photos. Given that there is an alternative plan to place HVAC units on the ground, Plan C, where they are not visible, we would strongly support selection of Plan C. So it sounds like that is the direction we're going in.
Okay, and then I see Sue has her hand raised now. Do you want to speak?
Yes, just a couple of quick questions. You didn't mention the material on the windows. I assume that they will be wood.
She said wood.
You did say wood. Okay, I missed it then. In terms of the location of the condensers in the yard, I think it's a good idea. I think we talked a little bit in our meeting about whether they could be put against the back fence for rather than along the side fence, just to keep them away from the door. But I think they should definitely be screened, and it might be possible to move them back there. They might just fit back in there and be less intrusive. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you want to move back to Rob for the motion?
Yep,
My
no more
motion is-
comment.
What's
Sorry,
that?
what, Joe?
There's no more comment.
Yeah.
My motion is for approval as presented with the proviso that the location of the condensing or heat pump units and the lowering of the entryway to the to the street level does not create a precedent, and all other details to staff.
Okay, Tom, are you okay with that, or did you want to add some language?
Just in, you know me, I'm, I always can add a lot of words. With respect to the precedent, or the fact that it's not a precedent, I'd like to see in the motion the specifics. First of all, it's the front entrance and also the rear entrance and the HVAC. Let me suggest just an alternative language for that piece of it. And my apologies, it's longer, but 3 years from now, when we need to point at something, I'd like to have something we can point to. That the approval of modifications of the rear bay and the front entrance and the location of the HVAC equipment are specific to this case, reflecting the special egress and access code requirements associated with the approved use of the building as a school, and or the corner location and atypical dimensions of the building, and are not precedents for other applications.
Okay.
And Rob, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. We can incorporate that language into my.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So do I have a second?
Second.
Oh,
Oh, I think that was Lisa. Great.
Okay,
All right. Gina Dimitriadis,
yes.
Tom High,
Yes.
David Sampson,
Yes.
Lisa Tharp,
Yes.
and Rob Weintraub.
yes.
Great. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, team. And thank you for working with us. We're all, I think, really pleased with the
Yeah.
end result.
No, I think it was,
It's a good
you know, it's a much better design solution. You guys really pushed us. And so while it might have been difficult, we all got there, and I think we're ending up with a better product. And now you have us obsessing about details and proportions. So we thank you
Wonderful.
for that.
Thank you for being such good
Mhm.
sports and allowing us to push hard. It was hard to push, but you really responded, and you came up with a very, as Serge said, an elegant solution. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh,
so now
Great.
this next one, 308 Commonwealth, has been pulled, right?
Yes, yep. So again, if you're here for that, we will be hopefully reviewing it at June 10th. So our next application is 26.0821 BB 116 Beacon Street at Front Garden. Replaced existing chestnut tree with magnolia tree.
Okay, and do we have someone representing this project?
I think, Paul, are you here? I thought I saw you.
Yes, I am.
Ah, great. Okay.
Great. So let's move to Joe's comments, and then you can do the presentation.
All right, staff notes that 116 Beacon Street is a 4-story stone row house constructed in 1856 and designed by Gridley J.F. Bryant. It was purchased by Fisher College in 1954 and remains an academic building today. Staff recommends approval, finding that the applicant has submitted a report from an arborist recommending the tree's removal and that the applicant is proposing to plant a suitable replacement tree. So, let me see, I have the presentation, Paul, that you submitted, and here's the tree as it exists pretty much today. And if there's anything Paul, that you want me to focus on visually, but otherwise I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so we had the arborist come in and to see if we can, we were trying to preserve the tree, and he thought that it was beyond recognition. And our concern right now is the fact that it's rotting towards the trunk, and that it's not going to be able to stay up straight. It's starting to turn, and it's also a safety factor, we think, up the road. So we're thinking before it gets too late to get it taken care of.
And Paul, what are you planning to replace it with?
A magnolia tree. That's what's on our other buildings right next to it. So everything would be the same.
Well,
Have you spoken at all with the garden club about alternatives? Because I know they have some concerns about the type of magnolias and so forth.
Our arborist was going to reach out to them, and he's done work around the area. And we're going to do whichever it best appeases that, yes. First concern though is to get the tree down.
Right,
And
yeah.
the second concern to get it replaced.
Yeah, your arborist's opinion was very clear that this was a diseased and dying tree, so.
Okay,
I'm ready to make a motion.
all right. Let's move to public
Sorry,
comment then.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Lisa, did you want to ask something first?
I was just catching up with the garden committee's report back to the BBAC.
Yeah, well, I think Lori's probably going to comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use a platform, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at backbayac@boston.gov. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on a project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues related to use, street traffic, and noise are outside the commission's purview. And I believe Lori Thomas has her hand raised. So Lori, would you like to make your comments?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Lori Thomas for the Tree Committee. We had our consulting arborist, Norm Haley, look at this tree, and he agreed with the arborist, Ryan Andrews, that it is clearly dying and needs to be removed immediately as it could be a safety hazard. So we're in complete agreement with that. We also noticed that there's a long stretch, and maybe you could go back to that picture of the tree, Joe, where you can see the sidewalk. There are lots of opportunities along that area to plant new street trees when this tree is removed and sort of replace that canopy that we're going to lose and more. But that means that magnolia trees planted there will not get the full sun that they need. So we had some other suggestions for understory trees, assuming we can get the street trees in there. And Margaret Picorni is here, so maybe she would like to speak about that as well. But we'd be happy to consult with you about that. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Any other hands raised?
Seeing any others? Margaret, did you want to say something? I know Lori mentioned. Let's see if you're still here. I can.
So
Margaret,
Lori, you're planning to ask the city to put in another tree?
Yes, what we would like to do,
sorry, you're Margaret Picorni. Just let's make sure that's who's speaking.
yes, this is Margaret. This is me. We work with the city to do plantings where there is long stretches of sidewalk where it's possible to do that. And now with this large tree, which we are paying to see go, but we agree that it is a hazard. There is an opportunity with the new tree ordinances in the city. The abutters to a space where a tree is to be planted must agree to it. So as we move forward with trying to get the city interested in doing this, we would need Fisher's cooperation, which I'm hoping that you would be willing to give to us. I don't think that, I think you should plant the magnolia if that's what you like. And I think because of the other magnolias in that stretch, it would be nice. The street trees, if there is a possibility to do more than one, could be positioned on either side of what you decide to plant. So I don't think the sun issue is that critical, but we will need your cooperation to try and get the city to do that. So just keep in touch with us, and we're really sorry to lose this unbelievable tree, but you know, things happen. So thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Not seeing any.
Lisa, did you have any follow-up questions after hearing from Lori and Margaret?
No, thank you.
Okay, so back to Robert for the motion, please.
Motion is for approval with the proviso that the applicant consult the Back Bay Garden Club for an appropriate replacement to include a magnolia tree and or any other recommendation that they come up with.
Second.
Great.
Okay. Gina Dimitriadis,
Yes.
Tom Hyde,
Yes.
David Sampson,
Yes.
Lisa Thorpe,
Yes.
and Rob Weintraub.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving to application 26.0831, 334 Beacon Street at rear elevation and close unimproved heat pump at deck. We have someone from 334 Beacon.
Yeah, Mark, are you here? I think
Hi
I
there.
might-
Yep, you got Mark Fruit here. Can you hear me okay?
Bob Olson.
Yep. Okay, great. I'll just read my staff comment here. Staff notes that 334 Beacon Street was constructed as a 3-story brick row house in 1871 and later remodeled into its current appearance by the architectural firm of Cram, Goodhue, and Ferguson in 1907. The existing heat pump was installed without the approval of the Back Bay Architectural Commission. However, ISD approved the work under a sheet metal permit, and it wasn't flagged for the Back Bay Architectural Commission's review. Staff recommends approval with provisos, finding that there is no route inside the building to connect the rooftop equipment. However, the equipment should be enclosed on all sides, and I think you'll see what I'm talking about when we move through the presentation. So I know I received an updated presentation, so Mark, I can just move through this as you direct me to.
Sure. Yeah. Do you have the slides that we sent earlier as well?
Yeah, I think I'm showing them now. This
Oh,
should-
okay. I think we put together a little bit more of a detailed presentation, which I can share if that's
Okay, yeah, I'll let
if
you
that's
share.
helpful.
Yep.
Yeah. Hang tight. Let me just. You might have to give me control.
Yep, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Let me know if that is available. If we can see that now. That work?
It's on its way. There it is.
There we
How's
go.
that? Okay, great. First of all, nice to meet everybody. Thank you for the time. Joe, you gave a good overview for kind of how we ended up here. So appreciate everyone reviewing this, and we'll walk you through, what the existing conditions are, what's in place now, and what we're obviously proposing, to have completed at this time. So here's just a quick shot for this. As a reminder, it is a heat pump enclosure and the design. We do have the sheet metal permit, as Joe mentioned, that was applied for in October of last year and approved. The heat pump was installed, and then we've partially completed enclosing it, which we'll detail here kind of what the final enclosure will look like. Just a quick overview of what the unit is and where it is. It's at 334 Beacon Street. It's this, 3rd floor unit that we've kind of outlined here in this dotted red. Hopefully people can see it, even though it's quite thin here. It's a 1-bedroom condominium, about 1,300 square feet. It does have a large roof deck off the back of it facing the Charles River. And again, as a reminder, this is, for the heat pump enclosure that would be sitting on that back deck. Just again, from an existing conditions perspective, this is a side shot from Fairfield Street. So given the elevation, there is no visibility, of the deck from this side, as well as from Back Street. So this photo on the right-hand side here, if everybody can see that, what's outlined is the roof deck and kind of the limited visibility on that deck from Back Street. Third, just from another existing conditions perspective, so there's 2 units with 2 roof decks. One unit is much lower, and one item that was brought, to mind during the NABB presentation was the significant amount of exposure. And just from a, visibility perspective, we wanted to highlight that how much higher unit 5, the unit we're obviously in and proposing tonight, is than unit 3, and kind of what's on the roof deck there. So this is another shot basically from, this is actually from the Fairfield Street Bridge, as that was one location that the NABB asked us to take a couple shots from to ensure that there's no visibility. This obviously shows that. Another shot just a little bit further back, just to confirm that. And then here, which is I think what the NABB was actually getting at, which is from the top of the Fairfield Street Bridge, right? So basically standing on Sturrow Drive. This is the view of the 2 different units, right? Unit 5 on the right, higher up, unit 3 on the bottom. As you can see, there is an existing both planters in similar kind of dark wood fashion to the current decking and our proposed enclosure, and also an HVAC unit there as well, just from a precedent and obviously exposure perspective. Our proposal obviously here, right, as you can see on the screen, would be to fully finish enclosing the decking. So it would blend in both with the deck as well as the rest of the building, given the other kind of wood enclosures on the unit 3's deck. I'll skip through in terms, why we have to look at the deck, unfortunately. Going to the roof at this point, we'd have to go through 2 to 4, individual units, creating a pretty large disturbance for each of those residents. The building at 334 has been chopped up into individual 1-bedroom condos. So I think in that building, there are 11 or 12 different units. So unfortunately, snaking to the roof and having to get there is a very large undertaking that, is not necessarily realistic for us. And since there is an accessible outdoor space, it's the only accessible outdoor space, quite frankly, for unit 3, nothing on the ground, obviously, and then nothing on the roof. And finally, lastly, our goal here is obviously to match the enclosure as much as possible with the existing deck aesthetic, as well as the lattice that we'll propose here and show here in a second. Here's another shot, basically just kind of detailing the conditions, just to indicate kind of what would be filled in. And then lastly, here's a little bit more of a detailed presentation on what we are proposing exactly, which would be, like I said, this lattice looking wood that would go over the top and the rear part of it, obviously allowing for the exhaust because there needs to be airflow. But basically, this would be removable so that we could, access the unit in terms of, maintenance and things like that. But it would obviously match, using the exact same, effectively, IPE, EPE, wood that we have there.
Change it.
And I think that's it. I can go through kind of the key, points again, which I think everyone hears, but from a existing conditions perspective, we think obviously there's, it's in a similar location, obviously off just the parking lot side, right, of the building, which there have been other HVAC units, put there. The visibility from the Fairfield Bridge is from just the top of it, right? Obviously, we would look to enclose it so that would mitigate it as much as possible. We are subject to the location constraints, just given it is a 1-bedroom condo, and there's no common area there's no common area space on the ground that we'd be able to access. And then finally, obviously, doing our best to have the enclosure be as design appropriate as possible with the current deck as well as surroundings.
We've had experience in some other locations where lattice work has been used, and it really doesn't visually screen. What you look at it from the ground and you still see the equipment because of the way the lattice is designed. Can you give more detail on what that's going to look like and how visible the equipment's going to be once you've put it up?
Well, the intent would be to use this exact lattice here. I don't know. I don't have the exact dimensions of the slats offhand, which we obviously can report back to the committee. But the intent, as you can see from sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback there from somebody. The intent would be obviously to cover it as much as possible and try to blend it in.
Can you move the equipment further in towards the center of the deck?
We can. The only issue with that would be it would block. There's one window from the unit that looks out to the deck, that looks out to the Charles River, and placing it there would completely block the view. And again, the location is on the parking lot side of the building, back street, not particularly visible from, Fairfield Street. And then there's obviously the other air conditioning unit that's been put on the same location on the unit below.
And you're not dealing with that unit.
Understood, of course.
No, I mean, that was a question. Are the unit below is different because it doesn't seem to be masked either from your picture.
Yeah, Tom, I think that's probably a violation that I'm going to have to follow up on.
Okay, yeah, because that's we're trying to deal with one, and you've got another one which is being used as a precedent for this. So, and the other one is a violation.
Unfortunately, we just bought the unit in August, so we're new to everything here. So I can't comment or even know kind of the background for what's been installed, when it's installed, things
Right.
like that. So I apologize, to the committee for not knowing the history.
Mark, do you have a photo of a view looking out the window so I can see what the deck layout is?
This is probably the best one if you can see it. Maybe I'll flip. Hold on. This is probably it. And this is a photo basically as soon as you walk out onto the deck looking out. So there's effectively nothing else. We looked at putting on the, potentially putting on the right-hand side of the deck, right? So obviously that view issue is pretty significant. You would potentially be able to see it from Fairfield Street, and obviously given that is a, pretty public street, we thought it wouldn't make sense over there.
And you don't have a photo of the deck from the railing to the building, do you? Like the opposite of this?
I don't have one on there. This is probably the this is probably the closest I'll get. I don't have one in this presentation, unfortunately. Looking back at the windows, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have one, unfortunately.
I'm
here.
wondering if you can fit this up against one of the windows of the building or somewhere back in that corner where it's not visible.
Yeah.
The problem is the shape of the building, and you can't quite see it here, but as you can see, it kind of it juts out a little bit, right? So the ability to actually put it along there without putting it in front of a window is actually impossible. We would have preferred that, right? But this was the location, obviously, that kind of mitigates everything across all those different, variables.
Mark, could you show the picture again, showing it from the parking area?
This one?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a reasonable shot of it.
Is this a heat pump?
Yes.
Well, those windows to the right of that box, there's a little walkway down there. Is there a way to get this down there on the ground where it can't be seen from anywhere?
No, that's actually a fully landscaped private courtyard area for one of the other units.
You couldn't get it on the side of the building down there?
You'd be in somebody's courtyard area.
One question I have to follow up on Tom's comment, could the unit be turned so the lattice work is facing the inside of the deck and not outside? So you'd have the solid boards,
Yeah.
adjacent to the railing.
Do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, it could be done that way. I don't see why you couldn't do it
flip it
that way.
around. Yeah, you just flip it
Turn
around.
it 90 degrees.
Or 180
That might
degrees.
address your
Yeah, I
concerns.
think that would help.
Yeah, we can go 180 degrees, right? That's what I think you're referring to, right?
And so point it towards Fairfield or point it towards the building?
The building.
Well, if we're looking at the lattice side right now, the
Yep.
lattice side should face the building.
Right, so turn it 90
90
degrees.
degree turn.
Yeah.
The issue with that is then the window blocking.
Or 180.
We'd have
I'm
to
not-
look at that. Yeah, I think it's 180.
I
I
was
think
thinking
180. Yeah, I
180.
think 180 is the design that actually would probably work because it doesn't block the window. And I hear everybody on wanting to have the lattice on the other side, which I think could be accomplished.
I mean, that way it reads more like a planter box like we see.
I think I'd have to see some drawing of it.
Where
Mark,
is the condo association on, do you have any
So-
input across the building in terms of how they're being handled, these units?
So no input or comment on unit 3. We haven't really raised that at all. We've brought this obviously to the HOA. We had a meeting with them back in September when we started this project, as well as the renovations inside of the unit. We also went to them for formal approval after meeting with the NABB, requesting any feedback or any opposition, which we have not received. They've also cited looking for the BACC's approval prior to their formal sign off as well. So it's created a little bit of a circular approval process,
22.
unfortunately. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yes,
So
exactly.
you know, we spoke about that with Serge, and he he understood that sometimes this could happen.
If I might, this picture that's on the screen now, that long wall of the heat pump, if we flip this 180 degrees, that would be the view from the parking lot. That would be the side you'd be seeing.
Mhm.
And you would not see the other side from Fairfield. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Correct. No, you wouldn't,
Right.
because right now these photos, just to be clear, these photos are with it installed. So
That's
you
the
cannot,
Fairfield side.
correct, and you cannot see anything.
Okay. I think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay,
I will just, Jeannie, I'll get the script up for you. Here. There you are.
it's not showing yet.
Ooh.
Do you need me to give back the
I
screen?
can just
if you
move
could
to the
stop sharing,
agenda.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I'll give you back
That's
the,
okay.
the floor. There you go.
Okay. Members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand at the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at backbayac@boston.gov. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on a project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues related to use, street traffic, and noise are outside the commission's purview. Okay, I see, Serge, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you again, Serge Savard, Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay Architecture Committee and Chairman. The one thing that I did see in the picture, I would like to confirm with the applicant, but looking at the configuration of the building, it looks like the deck that you have installed is actually not aligned with your interior floor of your building, but it's actually, your deck is actually higher. There is one photo in your presentation where we see the deck, but we see that the deck is already started in the window. So it looks like your window is actually almost below the deck. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That
That's,
is correct.
it's
There's
pretty much the footprint of the building.
exactly.
Footprint
Okay.
existed.
Okay.
And
So
you
in
ha-
that, yeah, in that consideration, I would say that, you know, at the position of NAB, we always prefer things on the roof. Here, it's definitely not possible without a lot of inconvenience to a lot of residents. I think the suggestion that is proposed here of putting, returning basically the enclosure by 180 degrees, putting the side that is currently on the deck on the outward facing, pointing toward the west side, I think seems to be a reasonable solution to enclose the unit that otherwise cannot be located anywhere, given the height of the deck compared to the windows and the structure of the building. So basically, you're on a deck that is not aligned with the rest of the floors of your building.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I'm not seeing anything.
No, nope, I think we're all set.
Okay, so back to you, Tom, for your motion.
Approved with provisos that the installation at this location is necessary because there is no feasible route inside the building to connect rooftop equipment. And second, that the equipment is to be enclosed on all sides, rotated 180 degrees so that the lattice work is not visible from the ground, with the final location on the deck and the design to be approved by staff.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay,
That was David.
Yes.
So, Gina Dimitriadis,
yes,
Tom Hyde,
Yes.
David Sampson,
Yes.
Lisa Tharp,
Yes.
and Rob Weintraub.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
thanks. Okay, moving on to the next one.
Thanks all.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you all very much.
Okay, so we have application 26.0879, 226 Beacon Street. Replace 16 windows with historically appropriate wood windows. At front facade, reconstruct entry portico with new stoop and steps, along with restoration of rusticated base. At the lower level facade, reconstruct the historic street fence and install new planting. At rear addition, replace roof membrane and paving, and install outdoor kitchen and lighting and repair masonry. Do you have someone here representing?
Yes, I am Eric Daum from Carpenter McNeil.
Okay.
We're actually requesting a continuance so that we may amend our project description to accurately reflect the public hearing notice and that the scope of our work, which was included in the application.
And I'll
So
just say what he's referring to. There was a proposed enlargement of a rear window. It was not included in the written scope of work that was submitted with the application. So it was not included in my public notice. So we were going to have to
Defer that.
yes, yep. So it sounds like we'll just amend the application and we'll include that for the June 10th hearing. Is that what you'd like to do, Eric?
Yes, exactly. And we will issue a revised project description to you so that it accurately reflects our scope.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. There's no reason
Thanks.
we won't have to vote on that, Genia. So we'll just
Okay. All right, so moving on.
Thank you.
See you next month.
okay. I believe we're going to 395 Commonwealth Avenue next. So Rob, are you here? Rob Clocker?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Joe, do you want to read your comments first?
Sure. This is for application 26.0905BB, 395 Commonwealth Avenue. At front facade, replace upper floor windows, reinstall, recreate historic stained glass, make minor facade repairs, refresh landscaping, and install new fence. And at rear elevation, remove basement addition, create new parking area, garage door and garage access, add basement door and window, replace upper windows, repair facade, and provide new landscaping. Staff notes that 395 Commonwealth Avenue is a 5-story row house built in 1899 to 1900 for Frederick Eyre and designed by Alfred Manning and Louis Comfort Timpany. The proposed work is similar to work previously approved by the commission in 2022, and I circulated those plans to all the commissioners. However, the rear garage door is larger and there is a reduction to the landscaping at the rear of the property. The proposed plans show a proposed roof deck consistent with a deck approved in 2022, but similar to the previous application, that work was not included in the written project description. So that will not be included in tonight's review of the project, and we can review that at a later date. Staff recommends approval, finding that the proposed work is similar to what was approved by the commission in 2022. The applicant will need to submit a new application if they wish to proceed with the previously approved deck. So Rob, would you like to, I can stop sharing and you can run your presentation?
Sure. Yeah.
And I
I'd
will
be-
say, I do want to also just mention, the Boston Landmarks Commission holds or the interior of this building is a designated Boston landmark. So interior work will be reviewed by the Boston Landmarks Commission. So we're just looking at the exterior work today.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, commissioners. I'm here tonight with David Warner of Warner Larson, the landscape architect, and he can also answer questions if we get there. And also Chase Davis is representing the owner. Since we were in front of you 4 years ago in 2022, that was with a previous owner. The building was sold to new ownership, and what they've retained us to try to come renew the approval that was granted in 2022 with a few modifications. And what I'll do is I'll try to walk you through those changes. Many of you here tonight were on the commission back then. Thank you for your service ongoing, and hopefully we can get through this. But we're, of course, very happy to answer questions. Okay, hold on, here we go. I'm going to kind of breeze through a little bit of the history of the building because you had it in your packets in the interest of time, and Joe touched on the provenance of the building, but it's of course an important landmark in the Back Bay. Way out at the western edge with frontage on 2 streets, which is a bit unusual, both on Commonwealth and Marlborough. So we're going to talk about both facades. The Commonwealth Avenue facade is unchanged since 2022. No work has been done on the building, but it had been previously gotten some restoration work by 2 owners ago. But you can see on the first floor, there's an existing half circle stained glass window over the entry door, and then the 3 panels adjacent to it are actually just plastic replicas put in the windows as film, but the original stained glass, the 2 side windows are missing. The center window is in a crate inside the building. And there was a previous review by a contractor as to how to restore that, as well as recreate the 2 side windows based on that patterning. So what we're proposing at the front of the building is to do exactly that, to put that center stained glass back in place with original material and then recreate the 2 side pieces. The notes in red here are indicating changes to the facade. The ones on the left are things we were doing before, removing some accessories that were added to the building. And I'll talk about the fence in a moment. And then at the upper floors are non-original replacement windows that we are proposing to replace again with wood windows of similar configuration as to what's there now. And we have in a package some illustration of the type of all wood windows we would use. And here are some close-ups of the existing conditions at the entryway and some of the fire beacon that we would remove, and then there is a lower area down below which has original curved wood windows and doors which we'd leave and restore. For the landscaping, very similar to what we talked about previously, and we can get into questions if need be, but replanting the front garden, retaining the existing tree, the existing magnolia, and then we have talked about taking the existing fence down, which is a tall, non-original fence, and replacing it with a design somewhat like you see here, which is derived somewhat from the mosaics on the facade. We had a slightly less ornate fence in the previous package. After talking to the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay, they made the suggestion of giving this fence a little more heft, so making the members heavier, and we've also densified it to respond to those comments. Again, this fence was previously approved, and now I think it's gotten even a little bit better through ongoing conversation.
Can I ask
Sure.
a question? Would you prefer to talk about each facade as you go, or do you want to go all the way through the presentation and then come back?
The pleasure of the commissioners.
Well, why don't you go ahead with the front, and before you leave the front, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, I think that's it on the front, so go ahead.
Well, 2 things. And I want to say, having looked at the materials, that this is the only area where I have some concerns that I think still need to be addressed. And one is the fence. I think this is better. But if you take a look at the original building, as it was designed, it did not have a fence. And I would like to think that you consider that as a possibility or if not, I still think this current fence looks a little flimsy and flat. I'd like to see more graphics on it to know that it's got some three-dimensionality to it. It looks sort of like a modern take on trying to reproduce the Tiffany patterns. I'm also concerned about your choice, your use of the granite pavers in the front. That was in what was originally presented. When it was presented originally, it was presented along with the plans for 397, which is a 1920s building, and both were to have the granite entryways paving. That's now been installed at 397, and quite frankly, I think it would look terrible at 395. Yes, if you look at this original drawing of, or a photograph rather, of the building that was published right after the building was completed, you'll notice that 397 isn't built yet. It can't really be blown up, I don't think, on a Zoom screen, but you'll see that there is, I believe, concrete at the entryway, or two slabs of it. It might be white granite, but it matches closely to the, yeah, and it matches closely. Whereas if you put this sort of off-color granite squares in that area, I think it's entirely inconsistent with the original design and intent of the building. So those two things, the fence and the entryway, I think that's a photograph of what the gray granite squares look like at 297. I'm not sure I like them there very much, but they're at least a 1920s building, and it's not quite so jarring. But I really think you need to reconsider putting them in the front of the Air Mansion.
Well, and to respond to that, the owners would be happy to leave this as concrete. They just were trying to be consistent with what was approved previously.
That would be good.
And as far as the fence goes, I think they're also open to creating a hedge. Again, this was all about trying to remain consistent with where we were a few years ago.
Yeah, the thing with the fence is one can argue that nowadays, now that there are fences on either side of it, it may be more desirable to have a fence here. But I think visually, having no fence, keeping the original curbing, and having a hedge behind it would be more sympathetic to the original design. That's just my personal reaction.
Would you like me to continue through the rear? Yeah, and then we can maybe come back to this. I'm going to switch back to full screen if I can here. So the rear, the one update we did make to this presentation is we did drop 397 Commonwealth in. Our office also did that project, and you're correct that we presented both of these at a very similar time, not obviously together, but back in 2022. They were owned by the same owner at that time. The existing condition of the rear facade is very similar to what it was back then. There is this kind of low basement addition, which is seems like it's part of the parking lot, but it's actually an interior space which is covering up the lower portion of what was once a piece of the rear facade. And then we can see that there are 5 brick headers at the wall there that used to have windows in it. There's a close-up down here. Where we're proposing to remove that basement addition and resurface the parking lot and then open up that facade. And then the other aspect are these 2 windows at the first floor level, which are not original windows. They have more ornate headers, so they were larger windows at one time. We don't have an exact record of what they were, but we did back in 2022 make the case that they're of a size where a type of expressed bay window might be appropriate, and we proposed to articulate the windows like that, with the smaller one being a flat window and the larger one being a bay window, similar to what you see in this lower picture where it's all within the masonry opening, so we don't have to introduce a roof above that window, but still give it a little dimension. And I'll show you some images of that, what it would look like. in context. And then, as Joe mentioned, we had a garage door in 2022, but it was situated only under 2 of those brick headers. So we've widened it out to the 3rd because that small garage door was actually somewhat impractical for getting into that space with a car. And then we would have a door in the next position, and finally a window in the last one. The whole surface back there would then be brick. We'd rebuild the garden wall to the left to match what was already built at 397 to the right. And let's see if I have in plan, you can see on the basement where that garage door would be, and the need to make it wide enough to fit a second car to get inside. And then at the 2nd floor where those windows are, that would be replaced. That's the 1st floor, not the 2nd floor. And then for the landscaping of this area, we'd be using brick in 2 different patterns, a herringbone pattern at the area where we'd still have a location to park cars, and then a running bond that goes down towards the garage door and into a small walkway to the other door. In the package we had presented in 2022, we had enlarged this back area because we were trying to create a garden that could be viewed from inside the home. What has changed here is that garden has been removed and the planter has been lifted up. It was down at the planting was down at the lower area then, so we've lifted it up so it's more visible from the parking lot, and there's no garden for the house. And here's a cross section of what that would look like. So there's about 4 steps down, and the planter is here. We did, when presenting this to the neighborhood association, there was a request to try to get this planter bigger, to get a larger tree back there. It is somewhat impractical given the space constraints and the geometry. And so we're hoping that at least this level of planting will be a good addition and very positive change to the facade of this building. And and a few views of what that garden looks like and what the paving would look like. And that would be the rear of the building, and we'd be happy to answer questions.
You mentioned that you didn't like the fence and didn't think it was appropriate. There's a garden now where one did not previously exist.
That's true.
So a fence would be appropriate to keep it uniform with the neighboring buildings. So with that said, I agree with Tom that granite pavers are inappropriate, not to mention they don't last very long. They tend to crack. And I know that firsthand where I live. We actually removed our granite pavers and replaced it back with poured concrete. Which is
it always seems odd to be arguing for concrete in the Back Bay, but at some point it's appropriate.
In this case, it looks much better than cracked granite. Those granite pavers up and down Boylston Street are just an absolute disaster.
Yes, they are.
Safety hazard too.
Everybody on this call knows that. We've all had our ankles twisted. Granite, so brick would be more appropriate. Or maybe not, because it has like a limestone, almost like a limestone facade. Or any other material would be more appropriate than granite. So I like the fence. I think it's a nice takeoff on the Tiffany mosaics. This is a very, very significant building, so a lot of thought has to be put into it. I think this is the only building that was designed by Louis Tiffany in the United States.
It's the only one that's left for sure.
The only one's left.
Yeah.
Rob, do you have an elevation, a front photograph with both adjoining buildings and the area?
I don't have a good photograph of that since 397 had been redone. No, unfortunately, not handy.
Lisa, there is fencing, I believe, at 397, and there is now also at 393. So, and the lower fence that's being proposed here, I like the height of it if we're going to have a fence.
Right.
I go I'm sympathetic to what Rob is saying. I think that the fence needs a little more. I'd like to think of it as a wrought iron fence, not as a pressed steel fence, which is what maybe it is wrought iron, but it looks like pressed steel to me. And it needs heft. It needs some, looked like it was done in 1900, not in
So
2026.
Maybe they took, if they made the pickets thicker and the posts thicker, and then the actual design, the circles and the diamond, maybe if those were made thicker.
Yeah.
May we look at the historic front elevation photo again?
What's that? Because did you have that, Joe? I just have.
Yeah, that's
Okay, so let me let Joe share.
That's the 397. And that is, this is a photo from 1901 from the American Architects and Building News.
Yeah.
From 2001. And you can see, if you blew it up, it can, at least on my computer, when I look at it, you can see that the concrete was divided into two slabs in the front with a line down the middle. And there was a fence dividing 393 and 395. And I think that might even be the fence that's still there.
Yeah. Well, I think you're on, I mean, I'll agree with you, Tom, that I think you're onto something about the specific integrity of this design. I mean, the railings at the stairs are so distinctive, this heavy block, monolithic feel. And I think part of the dissonance you're feeling, what I'm feeling as well, is that the wrought iron fence is a little bit of a common add-on to an extremely distinctive design.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in the idea of a garden framed with plantings rather than wrought iron.
Yeah.
Because this again is so monolithic. It's so different than what you see next door, and that is its beauty.
And it's different on both sides. You don't get that impression here because they hadn't built 397 yet, but you've got a 1920s building on one side, got I guess a federal style building on the right side. And, this needs to stand on its own.
Right. And I really appreciate the purity of you questioning the fence and agree with it.
So maybe if the applicant would agree to go back with concrete instead of the granite pavers and to go with a hedge instead of the fence.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Tom, that
would be fine with me if the commission agrees. I'm not sure, I thought I saw Jean Pelletier coming into the meeting, and if she is here, she's an expert on this building, and I'd appreciate her thoughts on it as well.
Do you know the neighboring buildings, do they also have fences?
They do now, yes.
So if this had no fence, would this be the only one without?
It would be, but that's not unusual. My house doesn't have a fence, and the houses on both sides do, and they're the ones they were all built as matching houses. So,
and this building is quite distinct in and of itself. So if it had a different treatment of the groundscape, I don't think it will feel unusual.
Agree.
Tom, I do have written comment from Jean.
Oh, do you? Good.
And when we get to public comment, I'm happy to read.
Great.
I think everything else is consistent with the 2022 approval.
Yeah.
Correct. All right.
Workmanship
make the motion.
You ready to make a motion, Tom?
Yeah, I could, or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to move to public comment then?
Yeah, let me get you our script. I'll make it bigger so you can see.
Maybe a little bit, okay.
Yeah, 10
Members
times
of the
magnifying
public.
glass.
will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand on the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at backbayac@boston.gov. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on a project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues related to use, street traffic, and noise are outside the commission's purview. Joe, did you want to read anything first?
Yeah, I'll just say, so Jean Pelletier has a long history with this property. She had submitted the petition to designate the interior a Boston landmark, and she was very involved with the two owners ago in the conservation of the interior and exterior of the building. So she writes, having studied and worked to restore this wonderful building for more than 20 years, I have few comments that I would like to convey at the hearing. Overall, the proposal is sensitive and appropriate, and I applaud the effort of David Hassin and the new owner to ensure the survival of this National Historic Landmark. I am not in favor of the proposed fencing, as I believe it is not in keeping with the period of the house and detracts from it. The fencing in the neighborhood at this time period would have been simple and elegant and would not include these types of motifs. I realize that it is playing off motifs of mosaics, but it comes across as very modern and metal like that. There is so much going on with the facade, I don't think any further decorative element is necessary in the fencing. I would be in favor of something that is very simple and does not have a design that detracts from the facade. The stained glass side windows that are to be recreated on the first floor should carefully follow the recommendations of Lynn Hovey Studios, which restored the only existing window of the set, currently in storage in the basement. The study produced for that restoration anticipated the ultimate recreation of those side windows and expertly documents the glass that should be used, the gold foil techniques, and the structural system. I can provide a copy of this study for use by a reputable stained glass firm for recreation that is in keeping with these recommendations. It appears that the windows in the former dining room are now being proposed to be bay windows. The original sills in these locations suggest that these windows were not projecting. So bay windows would be out of keeping with the overall aesthetic in the back. So we're talking about windows in the back of the building. Lastly, while the original dining room of the house, now proposed as a kitchen in the plans shown, is not part of the Landmark Commission's interior easement, I believe it still retains some original details. I would respectfully ask prior to gutting this room, if that is the plan, that I and perhaps Noni, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this name, Hewson, of the Curator of American Art of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and a Tiffany expert, be allowed entry to document the original floor, decorative wall features, and original ceiling. This will greatly contribute to the knowledge and scholarship of Tiffany Interiors. The original inventory of the house shows that there were 6 drop fixtures in this room, and some minor exploration revealed that the original walls and treatment are still in existence. Please permit this, particularly as I suspect many of these elements may not be retained with the proposed use. So Rob, I think that's something we can talk more about when we get to the Boston Landmarks Commission.
Yeah.
With gratitude for the sensitivity of the approach of David Hassin and the new owner to restoring this National Historic Landmark, thank you for allowing me to submit my comments.
Okay, thank you. And then I believe Serge has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we had also a lot of discussion and conversation, even with the applicant in our meeting, regarding the fence. It's a delicate element that we think needs really a lot of thought. If there would be a fence, and that we think that in the same way that that the previous curator just mentioned, we think that the style should be very simple, and maybe actually the historical photos could give some hints if they would be, but I think the issue of using edges is probably better. We had the same issues also with granite pavers with the color distraction, and again I would echo that we're not usually proponents of using concrete, but this is probably a case where the design and the majestic building here, we need to leave all the impact to the building itself. We do have some topics that were not mentioned during the hearing that I would like to raise here. At the back, the door actually had a glass that was frosted, and we thought that frosted glass was probably not historical in nature, even from the 1900s that this was built. So we think that maybe either glass or plain door would be better for the back. And there's also the issue that even if there's no fence, there's still the handrails that are there currently that are obviously not original because it was not a requirement at the time. But the ones that are there today look very, an addition that was done in a very modern way that probably would need some attention in terms of design for the handrails that are probably code required. The last topic that we were in favor of increasing the planting size in the back. But we will leave to the people from the garden club that are on the call, maybe to comment further on that aspect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I'm not seeing anyone else's hand raised. Oh, here, Lori and Sue. Okay, Lori, did you want to go ahead and speak?
Let me just ask her to unmute. There you go.
Hi, here I am. We would be very happy to work with the applicant on these garden plans. We noticed that there were some plants that seemed problematic, for example, yews, where rats really like to burrow in yew roots. So we had other suggestions for hedges and so forth. So if you would like to consult with us, we would be delighted to have that. And we also encourage a larger tree in the back if that's possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sue, did you want to speak? I saw your hand earlier.
Sue, you should be able to, oop, hold on. You should be able to unmute yourself now. Right again.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay.
All right. Hello. Sorry. Okay. Just in terms of thinking about enlarging the garden in the back, my thought was that it could be at least extended back towards the alley. It wouldn't be reorganize the whole thing, but simply because that parking space is so deep that you might be able to get a couple more. So it might be worth taking another look at to see if it would work.
Okay. And then thank you. And then did Margaret want to say something?
Yes, I do. Regarding the front, the fence is, I think, something that will keep rabbits out, but it won't keep rabbits out, but it will keep dogs out. And in terms of the long-term maintenance and viability of any plantings that are done in the front, even a simpler fence, as was mentioned by the expert in this, would do that. So that's another consideration. In the back, I don't know if the commissioners know, but 5 years ago on that block of Marlborough Street, there were no street trees. And the Garden Club, in partnership with the Parks Department, planted 23 new street trees on that block in order to make the block more human, in order to make it more attractive, in order to make it more hospitable to the new owners of both of these buildings when they come in. But because of the configuration behind those buildings, it was not possible to plant street trees behind them. So this planting location, which the designers have identified, is really important, and it's really an opportunity to plant something that will be larger, that will make a statement, even though it's closer to the building. It could be a significant shade tree, shade canopy toward that streetscape, which we've been working very hard over the last 5 years to make sure it's healthy and growing. So any consideration that could be given to planting something larger, possibly a Katsura, something that's an elegant tree, but still will provide a big canopy. It would require maintenance, and would require maintenance to keep clear from the back of the building, but that is not impossible. It's done all over in our alleys. So I just hope you will consider doing that, and know that the Garden Club will keep keeping those street trees healthy and growing. So all of you can be happy when you drive down Marlborough Street to your parking space. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. I'm not seeing any other hands, I think.
Am I allowed to ask Margaret a question?
Sure.
At this point? Margaret, your comment about the fence keeping out dogs, in your experience, is there any sort of hedge that would also do that?
No, dogs are very inventive and their owners are somewhat not helpful in keeping them out of people's gardens. The fences are really the only thing that is a deterrent. And even if a hedge is planted right behind the fence, it would sort of mitigate some of the design concerns that I understand people have about the fence where there was never a fence. But in terms of the long-term health of the garden, the fence is the only way to keep the dogs out.
So if there is that low curb and
That
then a very dense hedge, the combination of those two would, so I guess in the end, it sounds like it's a question of preserving garden over preserving design in a way.
It becomes a question of aesthetics or
Maintenance.
Garden maintenance. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Can I ask the applicants, the fees, is there a feasible, or would you be willing to explore with the garden club and with staff the feasibility of expanding the planting area in the back? Because you have reduced it, and it might be, I think the points that Margaret and Lori make are important.
Yes, we'd be happy to work with staff in the garden club to refine that area and figure out, what we can get to in terms of an appropriate tree size, balancing, the needs of just making sure there's space and a legal parking space. I think what the applicant would appreciate most is if that could be a condition of approval rather than a reason to come back next month.
Right, of course.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, so do you want to make your motion?
Yeah, move that the project be approved as presented with the provisos that the front entry walkway is to be concrete, the front fence is to be eliminated and replaced with a hedge, and the handrails are to be replaced with details approved by staff. And second, that the applicant is to consult with the garden club of the Back Bay with respect to the front and rear landscaping, including the possibility of expanding the planting area in the rear with the approval of staff.
I second.
Okay. Dina Dimitriadis.
Yes.
Tom Hyde.
Yes.
David Sampson.
Yes.
Lisa Tharp.
Yes.
And Rob Weintraub.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rob. I look forward to working with you more on this.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and that brings us to application 26.0896, 169 Commonwealth Ave at front facade, replace 3/4 story 8/8 wood true divided light windows in kind and at rear elevation. Install one new window opening at 4th story and remove fire escape. Do you have someone from 169?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Zach Millay here with the architects on the project.
Great, and
Joe.
We'll move to Joe to give his comments.
Yep. And I'll just, I just want to point out that the applicant has removed the proposed work at the roof from this hearing tonight, which was a roof deck, replacing a rubber membrane roof, and the erection of a penthouse addition. Staff notes that 169 Commonwealth Avenue is a 4-story brick row house designed by Peabody and Stearns Architects in 1879 to 1880. Staff recommends approval. So really what we're looking at is window replacement and the installation of a window at the rear elevation. I just want to make clear, all window replacement must be wood true divided light windows. So I think we just want to be clear in that when a motion is made, that the shop drawings are remanded to staff to confirm that they're going to be wood true divided light windows. And, we just need a determination, I think, on the removal of the fire escape and the rear upper story window that the applicant wants to install. So Zach, would you like to present yourself, or do you want me to move forward with what
I think you can move forward with what you have.
Okay. So,
So what we have here at 169 is we are doing sort of undergoing a whole renovation of the top unit of the house of the building. So there's 3 existing 8/8 windows that are essentially just going to be replaced in kind, like Joe had said, with 8/8 true wood divided light windows. And then we'll submit those final details to him once those are finalized and he can approve those. But that's the only work in the front this evening. And then in the back there, in the existing, there is a missing window at the top floor, right where Joe's cursor is. And there's also a existing fire escape that goes up to the roof. So given some of the work that we're doing on the interior and what we'll be presenting back to the board at the June meeting, we're able to remove that fire escape that is leading down there. And again, that is also pending some final reviews with the city and ISD and what their comments are. But from we understand, that's able to be removed. So as that window or that fire escape comes out, because that is a primary sort of bedroom location, we're proposing to put in a new, again, be a wood divided 1/1 window, which would be in alignment with the rest of the windows that are at that floor.
Would you, on that, would you be also matching the brickwork at the top of the window and
Yes.
the lintel at the bottom?
Yes, all the lintels, the brickwork, that will all
So
be,
it will look precisely the same.
it will be the same, correct. And essentially that's all we have today for this part of the application. Again, we'll be back here in June, and I'll send that info over to you, Joe, this week for that. So we'll have the rest.
Normally we wouldn't be approving new windows in a rear facade, but in this case, this is both the front and the back of this building were totally replaced in the 1920s by Harleston Parker's firm. They made it into a federal style building from what Peabody and Stearns had designed originally. So we're not dealing with the original facade here. As far as what I've been able to tell looking at the brick, I don't think there ever was a window there. It was probably designed without it. But to me, it makes sense as long as it's going to match perfectly to insert one in this case, since it's not original.
Correct. Yep.
Definitely agree.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, let's move to public comment. Okay. Members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at backbayac@boston.gov. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on a project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues related to use, street traffic, and noise are outside the commission's purview. And I see Serge has his hand raised.
Yeah, Serge Savard, Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay. Yes, we did review the application. It should be noted, obviously, that people may have looked on that picture. The sash for this building and the front facades are all white. It's one of the rare instances that we have in the neighborhood, but it's probably in that case the applicant will probably maintain this color, and it would be appropriate for this design of this building, but it's quite a difference. And for the window in the back, although typically also we're not very in favor of adding new penetration that were not originally in the facade, since this was rebuilt in 1928, 1929, and it was probably the window was probably omitted for a technical reason. And if it's possible now, and we think it's going to bring the symmetry, and it would not alter the design of this building, so we think it's it's appropriate to, in this case, to allow it, given the fact that this was already not the original facade, but already modified. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not seeing any other hands. Are you, Joe?
No.
Okay, so we can move back to Tom for his motion.
Okay, remember I get paid by the word, so.
I'm expecting a lot.
Approved with provisos that all replacement windows are to be wood with true divided lights. And second, that the insertion of a new window opening is approved in this case because the rear facade is not original and the opening will be architecturally consistent with the overall design of the facade, and that the dimensions and masonry will match closely the existing windows, to be confirmed by staff.
Second.
Second by Rob.
And Gina Dimitriadis,
Yes.
Tom High,
Yes.
David Sampson,
Yes.
Lisa Tharp,
Yes.
and Rob Weintraub.
Yes.
Great. Thank you,
Great.
Zach.
All right, thank you.
So I think the only thing we have left is staff updates. Is that right?
Yes, well, thank you. I think this was one of our longer agendas that we've had in a long time. So thank you all for your work. And I see someone has their hand raised, but I think as far as staff updates, that's all I have.
Okay. Charlie, did you have a question you want to ask?
Yes, I had presented and I received a card that there is replacing my windows for 551 Boylston Street. The application number 260914BB, and I've been waiting for the past 2 hours.
Is that one the administrative?
Yes, yep. It
Wait,
was
so we
approved.
did that at the very beginning. We approved everything. That was the first item on the agenda.
Oh, it's approved?
Yes, yep. You'll get your approval tomorrow.
Oh,
If not tonight.
Thank you so much. I really
Okay.
appreciate it. Been waiting.
You're welcome.
Have a good evening. Thank you
too.
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Poor
Thank
guy's been waiting the whole time.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much.
Oh, we're sorry.
I really appreciate it.
You saw a good show, though.
But that I enjoyed all the architect thing. And I've been in the neighborhood for the past 35 years, so my office is right on Boylston Street. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Welcome. Bye now. Okay, so you had no updates then.
No.
So we can move to adjournment.
Yep, if there's a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All right, I assume we're all in favor, so.
Yes.
Aye.
And
Hi.
Gina, thank you for chairing. You did a
Oh,
great
no
job as always.
worries.
Yeah. yeah, thank
Good
you.
job.
And
All right.
apologies that I made everyone wait. I didn't
No,
think
thank goodness you
quorum
got here.
was my client meeting. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for coming.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Good night,
you too.
everybody.
June.
Bye now.